Well, joining me from Washington now is France 24's Clovis Casali. He's following the president's trip for us. Clovis, I gather the French president today is to visit the NASA headquarters. What can you tell us about that?
Well, during this visit of President Emmanuel Macron at the NASA headquarters, he will be meeting with the US Vice President Kamala Harris. The Elysee Palace and the White House tell us that it was important for Kamala Harris to make sure she had time to meet with the French president here. Of course, they'll be talking about space cooperation, an area where there are strong ties between the US and France. And actually, the Space Council at the French Embassy also tells us that this area helped rebuild a relationship of trust between the two countries, a relationship badly damaged by the AUKUS case. Remember, when France was set to sell submarines to Australia, a contract dubbed the contract of a century because it involved so much money for France, while in fact the US and Great Britain got that deal. And the French at the time called it a backstabbing between two allies, and that was unacceptable for Paris. After this visit at the NASA headquarters, the French president will be going to the Arlington Military Cemetery for a ceremony, and then he will be going to the French embassy. There he will be addressing the French community, a speech to try to outline his vision of Franco-American relationships. A very important relationship for both countries. That's what the Elysee and the White House keep telling us, saying that France, of course, is America's oldest ally, and that's why it was very clear that it should be Emmanuel Macron who would be invited here for the first state visit of the Biden presidency.
And Clovis, tomorrow it sounds like the big political meetings between Joe Biden and Emmanuel Macron will get underway. What should we expect then? I mean, what kind of issues do you think the French diplomats will be raising with their American counterparts?
Well, first, the two leaders might discuss behind closed doors some very important issues during a private dinner here in Washington. Joe Biden and the First Lady inviting Brigitte Macron and her husband Emmanuel Macron for a dinner in a restaurant of their choice in Washington. And then tomorrow, of course, there will be the state dinner, meetings between the two leaders. There are thorny, difficult, hot topics to be discussed between the two leaders. For instance, the price of gas surging because of the war in Ukraine. France would like the US to do more to make sure that there's not such a big difference between the price of gas in the US and in Europe. And of course, you have the Inflation Reduction Act. That's around $400 billion given by the US government to US companies. This in times of economic downturn and also to move towards greener energy. It's good for US companies, much less for European ones and French ones. The French president saying it's unfair competition in the area of electric cars, for instance, and therefore France, Europe wants the US to make concessions, exemptions. That's what President Macron will be asking for from President Biden, according to Elysee sources. It's an important issue. What will he actually get from President Biden? It seems that he wants to, President Macron gets a European Buy Act, the US saying, we've got the Inflation Reduction Act, do your own in Europe. So will he get concessions? Difficult to say. President Macron is here in Washington with several business leaders. You've got the president of LVMH, Bernard Arnault, one of the most powerful businessmen in France. You've also got leaders from oil giant Total, energy giant EDF, several startups, all here to try to defend their interests, try to win business deals and support Emmanuel Macron, give their views on how to improve the situation for the French business world.
Clovis Casali in Washington. Thanks very much indeed.